Hi, welcome to our channel of ignou audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Social Sciences, SOSS, Master's Degree Programs, MA in Psychology, MAP, Second Year, MPCE 0 to 3 Interventions in Counselling, Block-4 Counselling, Future Directions, E-Counselling, Unit-1 Teaching and Training for Counselling, Counsellng 1.0 Introduction. Every person in this world needs counseling at some or different times. Sometimes, counselor himself/herself needs counseling when he/she is in stress. In today's scenario, each area needs counselors as there are interpersonal conflicts, poor decision making, and poor job satisfaction, less emotional maturity among individuals. Also, increased demands and decreased resources. It is required to train more and more persons in counseling. In schools, universities, industries, families, etc. Sometimes, counselors are appointed, but most of the individuals are not aware about how much counseling can affect positively individuals' physical and mental health. Most of the persons do not have much time to go to a psychologist or to go through proper psychotherapy. And also there is a social taboo to go to a psychiatrist or a mental health professional. But in their own working place, counselors can be appointed. Whenever people need to release their stress, the counselors must be readily available to them. In this unit, different training skills would be explained along with their theoretical backgrounds. 1.1 Objectives. After reading this unit, you will be able to teach a person, learn about the theoretical concepts of counseling, train a person how to do counseling, and different techniques of counseling given by different psychologists or psychotherapists. 1.2 Before start of counseling, there are some factors necessary to control as it would minimize the disparity between client and counselor. 1.2.1 Culture and race. Clients may come from different cultures and have different belief systems. It is necessary to know that the person who wants to get counseling belongs to which culture, the basic values of that culture. Nothing is inappropriate in terms of the cultures. Only the counselor should focus what is beneficial and what is obstacle in person's growth. If a person can carry the cultural values with his or her positive growth, then counselor should not intervene with it. Not only the culture, but race is also necessary to know sometimes. The information is not to discriminate the person, but rather not to hurt the person in any ways. Persons of different races have different physical characteristics. Race-sensitive issues should be dealt delicately by the counselor. 1.2 Social status. The socio-economic status of the person is also important to know. Number of sessions would depend on that. The language, income, educational background, the occupational status of the client should be checked. There should not be any sense of rejection by the counselor by any verbal or non-verbal gesture during the counseling session. 1.2.3 Demographic and personal data. It is also necessary to know the personal details sometimes, e.g. age of the person, his occupation, habits, and also the daily routine. Family background and about the significant others of the person, and interpersonal relationships and conflicts are the important things to note. 1.2.4 Marital status. For a married person, the meaning of life might be different than comparison to unmarried person. The person might be divorced, separated, the widowed, he or she might remarried or in living relations. 1.2.5 Sex orientation. It is necessary to know whether the person is heterosexual or homosexual. Sometimes, the person is bisexual. The counselor's attitude should be empathetic. Sometimes it is required to know whether it is a sex orientation or it is his or her sex preference. 1.2.6 Age. Age of the person is also an important factor. The counseling of a child would be different from an adult. The adults are more rigid to change in comparison to children. Adolescents have their different viewpoints because of their biological and psychological changes at that time. 1.2.7 Physical or mental disability. if a person is physically or mentally challenged, his thinking might be affected because of that. It should take care by the counselor with full acceptance and empathy. The counselor should not show sympathy with the client. Rather, one should accept that disability and give the counseling according to that. 1.2.8 Religion or philosophy. Sometimes religion and philosophy affects the counseling. Counselor has to show regard for the client's religion. Some persons are influenced by some spiritual or philosophical thinking. Do not try to break it, it might hurt the person. The counselor should fit his frame of reference according to the client's frame of reference. Then only the client can understand the messages of counselor. 1.2.9 Gender role identity. Mostly the person's behavior, thoughts, feelings and actions are affected by their gender, masculine or feminine. Sometimes a person has contradictory feelings than his or her gender. The tendency is opposite to his or her gender because of some biological causes or learned behavior. Sometimes the client is apprehensive due to gender of the counselor. If the resistance comes, the client should be referred to another counselor. 1.3 Approaches to counseling. 1.3.1 Psychoanalytic approach. First of all, the techniques given by Sigmund Freud would be discussed. Free association is the central technique in psychoanalytic therapy, in which the client is encouraged to say whatever comes to mind, regardless of how painful, silly, trivial, illogical, or irrelevant it may be. In essence, clients flow with any feelings or thoughts by reporting them immediately without censorship. Second important technique is catharsis, in which the focus is to release the suppressed emotions of the client. The interpretation technique consists of the analysts pointing out, explaining, and even teaching the client the meanings of behavior that is manifested in dreams, free associations, resistances, and the therapeutic relationships itself. Interpretation includes identifying, clarifying, and translating the client's material. Dream analysis is an important technique for uncovering unconscious material and giving client insight into some areas of unresolved problems. Freud sees dreams as the royal road to the unconscious. Dreams have two levels of contents. Latent content consists of hidden, symbolic, and unconscious motives, wishes, and fears. The second one is manifest content, which is the dream as it appears to the dreamer. The unconscious sexual and aggressive impulses that make up latent content are transformed into the more acceptable manifest content. According to Freud, there are also usual resistances, defensive approaches in daily life known as resistances. They need to be recognized as devices that defend against anxiety but that interfere with the ability to accept change. If handled properly, resistance can be one of the most valuable tools in understanding the client. The another technique is transference, which manifests itself in the therapeutic process at the point where clients' earlier relationships contribute to their distorting the present with the therapist. It makes sense that clients often react to their therapist as they did to a significant person. Through the relationship with the therapist, clients express feelings, beliefs, and desires that they have buried in their unconscious. Through appropriate interpretations and working through of these current expressions of early feelings, clients are able to change some of their long-standing patterns of behavior. Alfred Adler uses the term fictional finalism to refer to an imagined central goal that guides a person's behavior. He stresses that striving for perfection and coping with inferiority by seeking mastery are innate. The human beings experience inferiority, they are pulled by the striving for superiority. According to Adler, the term lifestyle refers to an individual's basic orientation to life or one's personality and includes the themes that characterize the person's existence. The counselor's goal is to fostering social interest, helping clients overcome feelings of discouragement and inferiority, modifying clients' views and goals that are changing their lifestyle, changing faulty motivation, assisting clients to feel a sense of equality with others and helping clients become contributing members of society. However, according to Carl Jung, the human beings have both constructive and destructive forces, and to become integrated, it is essential to accept the dark side of our nature with its primitive impulses. Acceptance of this dark side, shadow, does not imply being dominated by this, but simply recognizing that this is a part of our nature. Jung teaches that many dreams contain messages from the deepest layer of the unconscious. He calls it as collective unconscious. Jung sees a connection between each person's personality and the past. Not only childhood events but also the history of the species. Thus, dreams reflect both individuals' personal unconscious and collective unconscious. Content of the collective unconscious is called archetypes. The therapist deals the complexes buried in these unconscious parts. The persona is one of the archetypes. It is a mask or public face that we wear to protect ourselves. The animus and the anima represent both the biological and psychological aspects of masculinity and femininity, which are thought to coexist in both the sexes. The shadow represents our dark side, the thoughts, feelings, and actions that are socially reprehensible and that we tend to disown by projecting them outward.
Another approach is self-psychology or object relation theory. The object relations are interpersonal relationships as they are represented intra-psychically. The term object refers to that which satisfies a need. It is used interchangeably with the term other to refer to an important person to whom the child, and later the adult, becomes attached. Others are perceived by an infant as objects for gratifying needs. According to Margaret Mahler, the individual begins in a state of psychological fusion with the mother and progresses gradually to separation. The unfinished crises and residues of the earlier state of fusion, as well as the process of separating and individuating, have a profound influence on later relationships. Object relations of later life build on the child's search for a reconnection with the mother. According to Mahler, the first phase of self-development is normal infantile autism. Here the infant is presumed to be responding more to states of physiological tension. The infant is, in many respects, unable to differentiate itself from its mother, and according to Melanie Klein perceives parts, breast, face etc., rather than a unified self. The adults show the most extreme forms of lack or psychological organization and sense of self due to fixations at this most primitive infantile stage. The second phase called symbiosis. It starts roughly through 18 months. Here the infant has pronounced dependency on the mother. The infant seems to expect a very high degree of emotional attunement with its mother. The third stage calls the separation process. During this time of differentiation, the child experiences separation from significant others yet still turns to them for a sense of confirmation and comfort. These relationships can provide a healthy self-esteem if the child develops his sense of self. Children who do not differentiate may later suffer from narcissistic character disorders, a grandiose and exaggerated sense of self-importance and exploitive attitude towards others. People with a borderline personality disorder have moved into separation process but have been thwarted by maternal rejection of their individuation. Mahler's fourth phase involves a move toward constancy of self and object. By now, others are more fully seen as separate from the self. Ideally, children can begin to relate without being overwhelmed with fears of losing their sense of individuality, and they may enter into the later growth with a firm foundation of selfhood. 1.3.2 Existential and Humanistic Approaches. Existential approach believes that human beings are free and therefore responsible for our choices and actions. They are not victims of circumstances, rather they are what they choose to be. The aim of therapy is to encourage clients to reflect on life, to recognize their range of alternatives, and to decide among them. Once clients begin the process of recognizing the ways in which they have passively accepted circumstances and surrendered control, they can start on a path of consciously shaping their own lives. Existential therapy is a process of searching for the value and meaning in life. The counselor's basic task is to encourage clients to explore their options for creating a meaning existence. One can begin by recognizing he should not have to remain passive victims of our circumstances but instead can consciously become the architect of his life. Viktor Frankl developed logotherapy, which means therapy through meaning. It is aimed at challenging individuals to find meaning and purpose through, among other things, suffering, work, and love. Rollo May emphasizes that it takes courage to be, and our choices determine the kind of person we become. The struggle is between the security of dependence and the delights and pains of growth. James Bagentil views therapy as a journey that delves deeply into the client's subjective world. The counselor contacts with the client's phenomenological, experiential world. Irvin Yalom has developed an existential therapy that focuses on 4 ultimate human concerns: death, freedom, existential isolation, and meaninglessness. The humanistic approach is based on a system of values and people's abilities to develop their human potential. Carl Rogers' person-centered approach focuses on the client's responsibility and capacity to discover ways to become fully functioning. With growing self-awareness, a client can develop more appropriate behaviors. The approach emphasizes the phenomenal world of the client. The therapists concern themselves mainly with the client's perception of self and the world. In Rogers' view, the aim of therapy is to assist clients in their growth process, so that they can better cope with problems they are now facing and with future problems. The therapist experiences unconditioned positive regard and acceptance for the client. And also he has an empathic understanding of the client's internal frame of reference and he strives to communicate this experience to the client. Empathy is the total understanding of the client's inner world. Unconditioned positive regard means a counselor is having regard toward the client without an expectation any condition. Maslow emphasizes enhancing clients' abilities to experience their feelings and think and act in harmony with their underlying tendencies to actualize themselves as unique individuals. 1.3.3 Behavioral approach. In classical conditioning, any response can be elicited by an unnatural stimulus rather than its natural stimulus through continuous association of that response with the unnatural stimulus. The response then is known as the unconditioned response. The conditioning can be done to make a person learn any new behavior. Also, if a person learned any inappropriate or unacceptable behavior, the deconditioning can be done. In operant or instrumental conditioning, the person can learn to operate any behavior through rewards. These are called reinforcements. They might be positive or negative. The counselor sometimes uses these techniques to desensitize the client from the anxiety or fear-inducing stimuli. Sometimes a counselor uses a positive reinforcement to make a child learn the appropriate behaviors. In behavior therapy, the therapist attempts to get information about situational antecedents, the dimensions of the problem behavior, and the consequences of the problem. Counselor clarifies the client's problem, designs target behavior, and formulates the goals for therapy. He makes strategy to give therapy in which appropriate behaviors are reinforced and others are not. 1.3.4 Cognitive behavioral approach. In cognitive behavior therapy, the counselor not only does behavioral rehearsals to modify the inappropriate behavior of the client, but also tries to change the negative perceptions and thinking of the person through cognitive therapy. The counselor assesses client's distortions in thoughts and his maladaptive behaviors, then he intervenes to help them to practice for balanced behavior and thoughts through different techniques. One of the technique is to interchange the automatic thoughts coming in the client's mind with the balanced or alternative thoughts without the suppression of automatic thoughts in the subconscious mind of the client. Different types of relaxation techniques are also used in that. However, in rational emotive therapy, REBT, the counseling involves disputing clients' irrational beliefs and replacing them with more rational beliefs. The therapist educates the client about the nature and course of their problem and how thoughts influence their emotions and behaviors. Homework is often used as a part of cognitive therapy. The purpose of homework in cognitive therapy is not merely to teach clients new skills and to come back to perform the skills they can, but also to enable them to test their beliefs in daily life situations. 1.3.5 Gestalt Approach Gestalt Therapy, developed by Fritz Perls and his wife Laura in 1940s. The approach is phenomenological because it focuses on the client's perception of reality, and existential because it says that people are always in the process of becoming, remaking, and rediscovering themselves. According to Latner, holism is one of the fundamental principles which emphasizes on the integration or whole, how the parts fit together, and how the individual makes contact with the environment with this holistic viewpoint. The field theory of Gestalt counseling is grounded on the principle that the organism must be seen in its environment as part of the constantly changing the field. Everything is relational, in flux, interrelated, and in process. The figure formation process describes how the individual organizes the environment from moment to moment. The undifferentiated field emerges from the background and becomes the focal point of the individual's attention and interest. The figure formation twined with the principle of organismic self-regulation, a process by which equilibrium is disturbed by the emergence of a need, a sensation, or interest. Organisms will do their best to regulate themselves, given their own capabilities and the resources of their environment.
Polster and Polster, 1973, describe 5 major channels of resistances: introjection, projection, retroflexion, deflection, and confluence. Introjection is the tendency to uncritically accept others' beliefs and standards without assimilating them to make them congruent with who we are. Projections are those attributes of our personality that are inconsistent with our self-image are disowned and put onto other people. Retroflexion consists of turning back to ourselves what we would like to do to someone else or doing to ourselves what we would like someone else to do to us. This process seriously restricts engagement between the person and his or her environment. In deflection, the individuals engage their environment on an inconsistent basis, which results in their feeling a sense of emotional depletion. Confluence involves a blurring of the differentiation between the self and the environment. It is shown by the clients who have a high need to be accepted and liked. Techniques of Gestalt therapy include the internal dialogue exercise, making the rounds, the reversal technique, the rehearsal exercise, the exaggeration exercise, and staying with the feeling. An internal dialogue exercise is done using 2 empty chairs. There are 2 roles, attitudes played by the client himself. One is top dog, i.e. righteous, authoritarian, moralistic, demanding, bossy, and manipulative. The underdog plays the role of disobedient child who struggles for control. Making the round is Gestalt exercise that involves asking a person in a group to go up to others in the group and either speak to or do something with each person. The purpose is to confront, to risk, to disclose the self, to experiment with new behavior, and to grow and change. In the reversal technique, the counselor could ask the client who claims to suffer from severe inhibitions and excessive timidity to play the role of an exhibitionist. In the rehearsal exercise, the client share their rehearsals out loud with the therapist. They become more aware of the many preparatory means they use in bolstering their social roles. In the exaggeration exercise, the client is asked to exaggerate the movement or gesture repeatedly, which usually intensifies the feeling attached to the behavior and makes the inner meaning clearer. Staying with the feeling is a technique in which the therapist may urge the clients to stay with their feeling. He may encourage the client to go deeper into the feeling or behavior they wish to avoid. Facing, confronting, and experiencing feelings not only takes courage but also is a mark of a willingness to endure the pain necessary for unblocking and making way for newer levels of growth. 1.3.6 Reality Approach. Reality therapy is based on choice theory, which is developed by Glasser, 2000. Choice theory posits that we are not born blank slates waiting to be externally motivated by forces in the world around us. Rather, we are born with 5 genetically encoded need survival, love, and belongingness, power, freedom, and fun that drive us all our lives. Everyone has these needs but may vary in strengths. Reality: therapists begin by asking clients what they want from therapy. They also inquire about the choices clients are making in their relationships. There is always a major, unsatisfied relationship, although in the beginning the client may deny. In the first session, the counselor looks for and defines the wants of the clients. The therapist also looks for a key unsatisfying present relationship, usually with a spouse, a child, a parent, or an employer. Glasser advises therapists to help the client see how an unsatisfying present relationship is at the core of his or her problem. When client begins to realize that he or she cannot control only their own behavior, therapy is underway. The rest of therapy focuses on how clients can make better choices. 1.3.7 Family System Approach. Alfred Adler, Marie Bowen, Virginia Satir, Carl Whitaker, and Salvador Minichin, Jay Haley and Chloe Madans are the best-known psychotherapists focus on family system approach. The central principle of family system approach is that the client is connected to living systems and that change in one part of the unit reverberates throughout other parts. A treatment approach that comprehensively addresses the other family members and the larger context, as well as an identified client, is required. Because a family is an interactional unit, it has its own set of unique traits. It is not possible to accurately assess an individual's concerns without observing the interaction with a mutual influence between the other family members, as well as the broader contexts in which the person and the family live. To focus on the internal dynamics of an individual without adequately considering interpersonal dynamics yields an incomplete picture. Systemic therapists do not deny the importance of the individual in the family system, but they believe an individual's affiliations and interactions have more power in the person's life than a single therapist could ever hope to have. Bowen assumes that multigenerational and influences are central in understanding present nuclear family functioning. What occurs in one generation will probably occur in the next because key unresolved emotional issues tend to be played out over generations. He devised a family diagram or genogram as a way of collecting and organizing important data over at least 3 generations. It is a tool for both the therapist and family member to understand critical turning points in the family's emotional processes and to note dates of births, deaths, marriages, and divorces. The genogram also gives information about some of these characteristics of family, cultural and ethnic origins, religious affiliation, socioeconomic status, type of contact among family members, and proximity of family members. The therapist task also includes checking the functional versus dysfunctional communication in families, defensive stances in coping with stress, family roles, and family triads. The goal of the therapy are mainly generating hope and courage in the family members to formulate new options, accessing, strengthening, enhancing, or generating coping skills in family members, and encouraging members to exercise options that will result in health as opposed to the mere elimination of symptoms. Satir Bitter, 2000, 1.4 The counseling process. The process of counseling is systematic and previously planned before starting the session. This is based on the symptoms, resources, personality, family and environment, support and belief system of the client. The following steps are necessary to include in the counseling process. 1.4.1 Starting and structuring. The counselor should maintain a professional relationship with the client. The counseling is given only in the fixed sessions. It should be assured that on phone, on the way, or any other informal place the counselor will not talk to the client in an informal manner. Each and every word said during the counseling session should be directional and a part of counseling. There should not be any further talking and personal interest in any part of life of the client. The language and communication pattern and tone of the counselor should be comfortable for the client. If there is very much discrepancy between the languages and understanding, counseling should not be carried out. The counselor's tone, pauses, patience, adding affirmations, acceptance, cross-question in very subtle way would decide the direction of counseling. Good empathic responses from counselor elicit honest self-exploring responses from clients. To give a well-planned counseling to a client, the counselor should listen carefully the client and try to get details of his case study from various resources, informants, medical and psychological reports, information given by the client himself, etc. 1.4.2 Development of insight and making rapport. Active listening is a major step of counseling. A client comes to a counselor with lots of bad experiences, negative emotions, complexes, conflicts, etc. He does not know what his exact problem is. So many things are going the brain of the person. When the counselor gives relaxation to the client and ready to accept everything going to be said by the client starts saying on and on. It is counselor's duty to let him speak first and decide which part of the client's life he will deal first. The client may be given some motivational sessions, relaxations, and psychoeducation to develop insight about the current problem. The client should be assured that the personal information shared by him would be kept confidential. Any information given by the client should not be discussed with any of the family member without the consent of the client. When it is required, then the counselor should do it very carefully in indirect manner. 1.4.3 Paraphrasing and release of emotions. Paraphrasing is just reflecting back what is communicated by the client in other words. This is done to assure the client that the counselor has understood the exact meaning conveyed by client's internal frame of reference. But sometimes the counselor has to repeat the same words instead paraphrasing. The client feels free to express his feeling in an empathetic atmosphere. By his gestures, e.g. slightly nodding of head or through eyelash movement, the counselor shows acceptance to client's feelings and wordings as he is paying full attention to understand it. The client starts releasing his emotions. The counselor should not intervene in between the release of the emotions.
1.4.4 Taking care of present demands, ultimate goals and the obstacles. The counselor should see that the client's need what in present circumstances and what is his ultimate goal. How these two can be put in same direction. How the client is made satisfied and what are the obstacles are in his way. If the person himself is responsible, it is the duty of the client to realize him. If others are creating problems, then the counselor make the client feel confident to deal with them through cognitive behavioral rehearsals. 1.4.5 Training relaxation and making the client accept the things. The counselor prepares the client to accept the things happened in past and start a new journey of life. The counselor teaches the client different relaxation techniques. These might be according the symptoms of the client, e.g. breathing exercises, Jacobson's muscle relaxation technique, meditation, diversion of attention exercises, rehearsal of balancing thoughts or sleeping exercises, etc. 1.4.6 Interpersonal relationships, conflicts, behavior and personality of the client. The counselor has to check the behavior and personality traits of the client. The counseling would include these issues also. If interpersonal conflicts are there, they may be dealt through role-playing. The client would be realized how much others are important for one's life. How would he seek help from others and how he would maintain his interpersonal relationships? Sometimes the significant persons may be called to understand the issues. 1.4.7 Facilitating problem solving and behavioral rehearsals to cope up with real-life problems. The counselor make the client do behavioral rehearsals in front of him. He desensitize the client and make him practice on positive thinking and so that he can apply it in real-life situations. 1.4.8 Improving clients' cognitive distortions and cross-questioning. To improve clients' perception and thinking, the counselor assures the client through evidences that this is his thinking and perception, not reality. The purpose is to give exposure the client and realize whether it happens really. For this, sometimes counselor do cross-questioning to the client. Sometimes the counselor probes the client to ask questions to the counselor and he gets satisfied by searching answer in his questions. 1.4.9 Family structure and belief system. The family structure and belief system of the client cannot be ignored. The client has to be made understood by the counselor in a very scientific way why this structure of family or belief system was made. Is it required to modify or not? How much help he could get from his significant others? Can he change his views without disturbing others or not? If required, family therapy can be provided. 1.4.10 Negotiating homework and monitoring. The counselor provides the homework to set the daily routine of the client and to raise his self-confidence that now I am doing something. Counselor tries to highlight on those activities which he did so the client is encouraged to become more active. Initially, very simple tasks are given to perform. Gradually, the counselor gives the complex ones. Counselor asks the caregiver to do monitoring. Also, self-monitoring by the client is done. Counselor asks the caregiver to observe the client, whether he is doing homework or not to intervene in the counselling. 1.4.11 Offering challenges and feedback. Sometimes the feedback given by the client is not satisfactory, however it might be due to several reasons, e.g. the client is not practicing the things, family members are not supportive, there might be all of a sudden something happens in the life of the counselor that again makes him discouraged for the counselling or financial problems. These are the challenges for the counselor himself. The counselor analyzes the things and decides now in which way the counselling can be proceeded. Whether the counselling is continued by the same counselor or the case should be referred to other counselor. If resistances comes, the counselor should manage it or should refer the case to other therapist. 1.4.12 Termination. The counselling is successful if the client himself asks the counselor to discontinue. The reason must be the client is enough capable now to manage his day-to-day life problems. Generally, termination occurs after 10 to 12 sessions. But sometimes due to some ethical issues, resistances or saturation, the counselor has to terminate the counselling. 1.5 Ethical issues. Set healthy boundaries in the therapeutic relationship. Informed consent is to be taken before applying any testing or therapeutic technique on the client. The client's problems should be dealt very professionally. The counselor must not take benefit from any situation, in any way. The client should be informed prior if there is any circumstance which can affect the confidentiality. 1.6 Summary. In this unit, we were dealing with the teaching and training for counselling. We discussed culture and race and how these affect counselling process. We put forward the various socio-economic, socio-demographic factors that have to be considered before taking up the person for counselling. Also, whether the person has any physical or mental disability which needs any other forms OIF interventions needs to be assessed and attended to. Then we presented the various approaches to counselling such as the psychoanalytic approach, the existential and humanistic approaches, behavioral approach and family systems approach etc. This was followed by the elucidation of the counselling process itself. How to start and structure the process, how to help client develop insight etc. The section also explained as GTO how to improve the client's cognitive distortions and explained the family structure and the belief system which all may influence the counselling process. How to negotiate and give homework to the clients and how to monitor the progress all some of the issues that were dealt with in this unit. Then the ethical issues were delineated and put forth. Thank you, subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.